members of the community on a state and local level, involving matters that affect each of us to try to figure out what's next. For months, whether you have heard it on the news or on social media, there's been a tremendous discussion about the areas that our panelists will cover this evening. Number one, the redistricting of Louisiana's congressional maps. Second, the issue of closed primaries and the effect of certain elections moving forward. And last but certainly not least, crime, knowing that there's a special legislative session that is to occur on February the 19th. I would be remiss that if I didn't quote, and in the very great words of the late great Marvin Gaye, we need to figure out what's going on. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over and turn off my mic and thank all of the panelists for joining us. And I hope that all of you viewing will get some really good information because we have a lot to discuss.
Am I next? Is it my turn? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yes, ma'am. That's you.
Yes.
All right. So, please bow your virtual heads and close your eyes. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and redeemer. Guide our mouths, open our hearts and minds as we learn what we know, what we should know in advance of our understanding of the political system we operate. Without knowledge, we as a people will perish. Galvanize us to embrace any challenges. God is omniscient. And be still and know that God does not sleep. And we also would like to take a moment to remember the League of Women Voters U.S. President, Dr. Deborah Ann Turner. Dr. Turner, who passed away on Sunday, January the 28th, 2024, from complications from a pulmonary embolism, a fearless advocate for voting rights and women's rights. Please keep her family and the League of Women Voters in your thoughts and prayers. God does not sleep. In Jesus' matchless name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. And thank you so much, Miss Leah Raby, Dr. Leah Raby, for sharing in that. And actually, Leah Raby and I are right next door, standing literally right next to one another as we are at another meeting, but we are doing our Delta business and joining you all as well. And so I just want to thank everyone for joining us this evening for this very important discussion. We know that crime, redistricting, and anything that goes on with our legislative session affects all of us in some form or fashion. And so I just want to give a shout out of thanks to our Social Action Committee for arranging this particular session, because I know that very pertinent information will be shared. So I am not going to speak long. I just want to welcome you and thank you all for joining us. And I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Robin Merrick, who will introduce our guests. And I am not going to give a bio of her because she needs no introduction. You all know her, and she will be facilitating this conversation in such a dynamic fashion that I know that all of our guests will provide information that is useful to our community. So, Dr. Merrick, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singleton, our fearless leader of the Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. And yes, you're wearing multiple hats tonight, and we thank you for taking time to be with us in your leadership role of our chapter. So good evening, everyone. We are excited about the conversation that we are about to embark upon for the next hour or so. But we want to be certain that we cover all the grounds that there are to cover in this time. And we're going to ask that if you have questions that you put them in the chat. We're going to get to as many of your questions as possible after we pose questions to our panelists that we've prepared. So we would ask that if you do have questions that are pressing, that you place those in the chat. And again, we will try to get to as many of them as possible. So you've already heard that we have a powerhouse panel in place for you this evening to talk about what's going on and what's next, and really to just have a conversation about what we need to do, not only as members of this sorority, but the work that we do in Delta Sigma Theta and the outreach that we have to our community. So this is a conversation for all who are listening, for the greater Baton Rouge community, for the state of Louisiana, wherever you are, there is something that you can certainly learn and be a part of with what we are looking to do tonight. So we're going to ask that each of our panelists introduce themselves briefly to you. We're going to start first with Mr. Mike McClanahan, who is the president of the NAACP, the state president of the NAACP. Mr. McClanahan.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I've done a few of these with the Baton Rouge Delta Alumni Association. I welcome every opportunity. I am the state president of the NAACP, but I also serve on the National Board of Directors. And I'm always glad to lend my hand and my voice anywhere I can. You can find me fighting anywhere there's injustice, because when we fight, we win. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. McClanahan. Next, we would like to introduce you all to State Representative C. Denise Marcel, and she represents District 61. Representative Marcel.
Good evening. How are you all doing? First of all, let me thank you all for inviting me to be a panelist. I think this particular panelist is a lot of knowledge I'm looking at, and so I'm feeling a little intimidated by the panelists. I am C. Denise Marcel. I'm a state representative representing District 61. I serve on the Appropriations Committee, municipal and parochial, and I recently switched over to the House and Governmental Affairs to attack the congressional maps. I served prior to that. A lot of my work has been with criminal justice, and so I'm honored to see the chief and welcome him to this conversation tonight, as well as we talk about redistricting and as we talk about what we're going to do about crime going forward. I am Ms. Marcel, and I'm here to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you so very much. Next, we have someone joining us all the way from North Louisiana. That's Ms. Giselle Bryant, president of the League of Women Voters. Ms. Bryant.
Good evening. Good evening to the panel and to all who share, especially a shout out to the Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter, President Singleton, and the Social Action Chair, Dr. Lewis, along with her co-chairs, and all of those who are listening in for this particular webinar. I am very proud to represent North Louisiana, and yes, I am north of I-10. I welcome you to the part of the state where we will make it happen. As you're seeing the redistricting map come forth, I am particularly interested in the work that the League of Women Voters do in support of voting rights, and particularly those rights of women. I currently serve as the president of the Cattle Bossier chapter, also the Social Action Chair for Delta Sigma Theta Triple Alumni Chapter, and I served as Delta Sigma Theta Redistricting Chair for the state of Louisiana as we wave through that 3-year process. I'm happy to be with you. I encourage you March 23rd to go vote.
All right, I was muted, but lots of things going on in Shreveport. Ms. Bryant, I love your choice in jewelry. We were thinking along the same lines tonight. So thank you for that. Absolutely, absolutely. Next up, we have, I'm going to say he's the, I can say this, he's the youngest member of our panel this evening, the Reverend Jonathan Hill, pastor of Evergreen Baptist Church. Reverend Hill.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Merrick, and to this fine institution, this great chapter of the Baton Rouge Sigma chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. I'm honored to be able to share with you tonight. Jonathan Hill, I serve as pastor of the Evergreen Baptist Church in Ethel, Louisiana, but also an advocate member of our community committed to social justice and advocacy. I'm looking forward to our time together tonight as we dive into these topics, which should be a very fruitful conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Reverend Hill, and congratulations on your new little one. We got to say that again for everybody. He's a new father.
Thank you.
All right, and the newest kid on the block, we'll say. Joining us is Thomas Morse Jr. He's Chief of Police for the City of Baton Rouge, newly appointed. So Chief Thomas Morse, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, new chief of the Baton Rouge Police Department, TJ Morse, going on my fourth week now from after being sworn in. It's been a whirlwind, but something I'm really excited about the future of Baton Rouge and what I can do, and really looking forward to this panel. My most exciting things I've gotten to do is go out and meet new people and be a part of things like this. So I'm really looking forward to today. Thank you very much.
Glad to have you here. And we were following the chief search, so we are here. I think you may have remembered seeing many women in red sitting in the interviews for the chief of police. And those were members of the Baton Rouge Sigma alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta and other Deltas in the community that were there watching all of those proceedings. Okay, panel, we're ready for the questions that we have prepared for you this evening. And again, I would encourage those of you who have questions to please place them in the chat. We will have Dr. Dennis, I believe, who's monitoring the chat for us this evening. So we thank you for that. And we'll be keeping a close eye on that such that we can ask questions after each topic. So what we're going to do is to take topic by topic. We're going to start with redistricting, then we're going to move to the primaries, and then we will conclude on crime. And so we'll keep those in those buckets, and we'll try to, if you've got questions in those areas, we'll try to address those while we're talking about it. But if you just have a question later on, we'll try to get to that too, okay? So first question is for you, President McClanahan. Why is redistricting such an issue across this entire country, and more specifically in the South?
Well, good afternoon. I must first preface the answer by saying that the United States Census determines who controls the funds that will come out of the census. The census says that everybody within the confines of the United States and its territories is counted. That means every person is counted. And so after redistricting, after the census count comes the redistricting part and apportionment. And so redistricting says that it's important because there are lines that need to be drawn based upon the elected positions of the state, the municipalities, and local government. So that means there are lines that should be drawn because the lines should be drawn according that every district should have the same amount or just about the same amount of persons in it. And so after that, the census gonna send money down. Hundreds of billions of dollars will come down to these state houses, to these local and municipal governments. Redistricting says the person in that particular district will be the person who spends those hundreds of billions of dollars. So redistricting comes down, and so the person that's elected in the redistricting process will be the one who spends these hundreds of billions of dollars. So it's important in the South because the South has a long history of undercounting, unrepresenting Black and marginalized people. I need to say that again. After slavery ended, the South instituted Jim Crow laws that would keep us out of voting, keep us out of schools, keep us out of hospitals, keep us on the other side of the track, keep us smelling pollution. And so our representative, somebody that understands our plight, hopefully will be the one that we can elect. And so these lines that are drawn according to redistricting will determine that person who can represent us. But now understand, power does not concede power. And so even though the census is, but the data is what it is, and even though the lines should be drawn according to law, power would not concede power. And so every day we are faced with making sure that every 10 years, people are counted. But more importantly, that the lines are drawn so that we can be adequately represented. Thank you.
Yeah, so power doesn't like to concede power. And so here we are with lines drawn all over the place to ensure that. So Representative Marcel, at this point, we are aware that the results of the 2020 census show that there was growth in the Black population in the state of Louisiana. And as a result, that was the basis for the creation of a congressional seat that properly reflected Louisiana's minority makeup. So tell us more about the legislative process the maps that came out of that, and where it all stands right now. We want to be clear on where we are for what will be happening in the next few months.
Okay, thanks. I did not say when I first started that thanks to Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter for this opportunity. They are certainly my sisters of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. So thank you all for this opportunity. I will say that this process started 3 years ago, where they had an opportunity to draw another minority seat. As I almost called you Representative McClanahan. Mike McClanahan just stated
You can.
they refuse to do that. And primarily because they don't want to turn over any power. And the crazy thing about it is now they're even saying that it's really about us not losing another seat in the House of Representatives. It's too close of a vote. We cannot have another Democrat changing things. So as they refuse to pass the maps that we put on testimony, and I know I presented a bill that ended up in the lawsuit itself, they refused to take any of those maps, to even let any of those maps out of the committees to be even heard on the floor. They passed a map that was unconstitutional. And that's what Judge Shelley Dick said it was. She ruled for them to go back and fix it, or she would fix it. And we find ourselves back in a special session. When we found ourselves in the special session, there was already a plan to give us whatever map they wanted. Still, again, we did not get to pass another map that I presented. That was a Senate Bill 4 and House Bill 5 by myself that we presented. Those bills were not allowed to move. The only bill that was allowed to move during the special session was Senate Bill 8, which is the bill that we ended up with, Senator Womack's bill. We did look at that particular piece of legislation and saw that a minority could win that district. So we could not necessarily vote against it. However, I did offer amendments to clean that piece of legislation up and make it better. Of course, nothing was allowed to be put on that particular bill. We're in a position now where the governor signed it into law on January 22nd. They came right behind that, and I think they filed suit on January 31st. In the Western District, I think the idea was hoping for a panel that would probably be more favorable to them than what they thought maybe Judge Dick would do. We still, I think it's next week that we go to court, a week after next that we go to court with Judge Shelley Dick to allow her to rule on this map. What they believe is going to happen is she's going to accept this map, in which we're going to run by. This is the only map that we have. This is the map that we will be using. Now, I'm sure they're going to try to do something to stop that, but it's the only map that we have because we've gotten rid of the old map that they initially passed by the legislature. So in this fall, we will be running on the new map. Now, if you want me to talk more specific about what those parishes include, that's East Baton Rouge, West Baton Rouge, St. Landry, Pointe-Coupee, Avoyelles, Rapides, Natchitoches, DeSoto, and Caddo. So it goes straight up through Louisiana. And the idea is you got to be able to connect it and capture enough Black voters in order for a minority to win the district. And so that's where we are now. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, but that's where we are. That's how we got here. We continue to fight each and every time you see us at the legislature, and we continue to get whatever they are allowing us to have.
So Representative Marcel, this is a bit of a follow-up to what you just shared. And thank you for laying out the process that got us to this point where we are right now. And that's speaking to the congressional maps. Now, there were also some changes or potential changes to some of the state legislature maps. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And House districts in the state level.
That's correct. And those have not been ruled on by Judge Shelley Dick yet. Those have not been ruled on. We're still waiting on that. So, okay. I mean, I said it as you talked about the population shifting and more African Americans becoming a third of the state. And we have 6 congressional districts. A third of 6 is 2. That's at least that's what they taught us at Capitol High School. Isn't that right, Pastor Hill? And so, and let me say this. It's come out in the news that they pretty much said we cannot allow them to do this because the vote is too close and we will lose the majority. It's no longer a hidden agenda. It is their agenda, and that's what they're going to push for. And so we've got to elect more people that look like us, and that fight for the people, the working class people, so that we can make a change.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. And I agree. 1/3 of what did we say? 1/3 of 6 is, and they taught us that at Scotlandville Magnet also. While y'all are talking about capital, I'm not gonna. We're gonna take a moment and talk about just because y'all brought it up. It's, 2 capital folks on here. Just saying.
I got it.
Gotta speak for the North Side. Okay, so speaking of the North Side, Mrs. Bryant, our League of Women Voters, going all the way to North Louisiana. So there's another lawsuit that's been filed, as you just heard, except this time the plaintiffs are challenging the congressional map that the minority community largely agrees with. So in this lawsuit, they're suggesting that the map that was recently approved, that Representative Marcel spoke of, is gerrymandered. And so just for the sake of this group, I want to make sure that we all understand the term gerrymandering or gerrymandered, and tell us what steps may have been taken to prevent this.
Yes, North Louisiana, we also agree that if you have 6 congressional, that 1/3 of the population represents 2. That's Huntington High School. Gerrymandering.
Yes, ma'am.
Is a part of the process where it is intentional manipulation of political districts. And that is lines that favor one particular party or class over another one. This particular lawsuit that has been brought against Act 2 that was signed into legislation by Governor Landry, as Representative has spoken to, we anticipated. It does not come as a hidden agenda that they were not going to move forward with legal action against, because the entire matter is to ensure that it does not go forward. Because it is law and it is a new map, the old map no longer exists. And what was in place on the historic day of January 22nd, I had to put that plug in because that was my birthday, so it was a major celebration.
Yes,
because
ma'am.
we had been working on this for 3 years. It's going to be in place. And as the representative says, this doesn't have anything to do with gerrymandering. This particular slash map that crisscrosses and come up the middle of the state, really following the track of Red River, has loaned itself to what needs to happen to ensure that there is fair, equitable representation, along with the fair map. There is nothing in there to indicate gerrymandering. The Voting Rights Act requirement has been met in this map, and that is why it is law. And because it's been enacted and signed by the governor, I do not foresee there will be changes. I think what we will vote on November 5th, 2024 will remain as it is as of today. The only thing that I ask is what happens in this particular process where these plaintiffs have filed this litigation is that we move forward very quickly and take care of this matter and dismiss it. So as we move toward the court system to resolve this matter, that we work cohesively like we did initially, and we stand very firmly together as the individuals have come together to ensure there is nothing that will change what has become law in Louisiana. So there is no degree where I think gerrymandering will be represented anywhere in this map. It is following the Voter Rights Act requirement, and that's what we are to legally do. And that's what they did not do. And so that is why we're at this point with the passage and signage of Act 2.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, Reverend Hill, you have been spending a great deal of time on voter registration and voter education efforts in your church and beyond. And some of the dialogue, and Representative Marcel can attest to this, and I believe President McClanahan as well, some of the dialogue that was shared during the hearings about Black voter engagement was harsh, to say the least. So share with us a bit about your efforts that you're doing, and also what do you say to those comments, and how can we move forward for the next election cycle such that those comments are not there to be made in the harsh manner that they were?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Merrick. I did hear some of those comments and even read some earlier today about, how we were the scapegoat, right? And all the blame was somewhat pushed on our community for not showing up to vote. And I always find that interesting that we can, give blame after the fact, but yet not necessarily rally around making sure we can have access to voting in a very equitable way, right? And not trying to remove those rights that people have fought so hard for. And so we've kind of taken an approach in my own work to really move beyond just registering. I think we do a great job at registering people to vote. We can have numerous registration rallies. We get people registered. But I've learned that how do we actually get them to the polls? How do we make sure that they are informed voters and move beyond that first step? And I would tell you in the conversation I had with President McCallahan just about a year ago, he said to me, we've got to move beyond registration. We've got to get folks to the polls on election day. And I think some of that comes with making every election a big deal and important. I heard someone mention the election on the 23rd, and people are not even talking about that right now, right? It's not a major conversation. So often we wait until the November, October election to make a big deal about it. But I believe every time there's an opportunity to go to the polls to vote, we ought to be making a big deal out of it. I can tell you my own local congregation, we have a goal to be 100% voting congregation. And if you didn't vote, I want to know why, right? I want to understand what prohibits you from voting. And so I think some of those things as making sure that those of us as our leaders are talking about it, we are advertising and we are publicizing it as much as we can. But also we are making sure we're getting people to the polls, and whatever that may look like, whether we are physically taking them, making sure they have rides. I think we're at a point now to where if you want to go vote, there's enough resources out there that we need to make people aware of to make sure they get to the polls on election day and be an informed voter, because sometimes I think we miss that. Beyond just giving a person a ballot to go in there and vote based off what a ballot says, but making sure they understand who they're voting for, the issue they're voting for, and the implications of their vote, I think is key things that we have to hone in on as we move forward for the next election.
Absolutely. And I think, the effort that we're doing right now, right here with the Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter, we count this as a voter education initiative that we are trying to talk about what has happened, what has brought us to this place, and how this will get us moving forward. That's so critical, I think, for our community. So this is sort of a follow-up for you as well, Reverend Hill, and anybody else can chime in on it as well. And that is, how do we really reach those people in our community who they're already marginalized and these issues don't necessarily resonate with them on a day-to-day basis, when day-to-day it's simply about, I've got to go to work, I've got to get the kids to school, I've got to get the kids fed, I've just got to live my life, and these issues are not at the forefront for me at this moment. So how do we actually, in your opinion, and this is for you, Reverend Hill, but anyone else can chime in, how do we get them to that place and really make these elections popular, make the conversation popular, such that we keep it top of mind?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to just the language we use. One of the things I found is that we become so technical in our approach to the issues that we're facing versus just saying, hey, this is going to affect you in this way. And I'll give you a prime example, the amendments, right? We always talk about how legalistic the amendments are. And that's not a top issue for people in front of them versus just saying, if you vote for yes for this, this is what's going to affect you down the line. If you vote no, this is the implication for you. And so for me, it is how do we break it down in a very simplistic way for those individuals we're talking to that can connect with them. If you do this, it's going to affect your trash pickup, and you're worried about trash. If you do this, it's going to affect crime in your community. If you vote for this person, they may bring this type of, and no pun, nothing against you, chief, this type of chief of police, all right? If you vote for this person, you may get this type of leader. And so I think it's making sure that we're using language that can connect with people each and every day so they can see the issue in front of them. And I would say also going to where they are, right? Going to where they are. I mean, if we have to go to the nightclub, if we got to go hang out on the corner, right, and engage them the best we can, I think that's another way.
And I see Representative Marcel, you look like you are anxious to say something.
Anxious to say something.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I would have to agree with him. And meeting people where they are is one of the key points, I believe, when we can explain it to them. A lot of people ask me all the time, Representative Marcel, why do you have so many giveaways? Why do you? Because it brings people together and it gives me an opportunity to talk to them. And whenever I get that opportunity, I have to say to them, hey, listen, you need to pay attention to this or this that we're doing, because if you don't vote for this, they say, well, I'm not making enough money. And then I have to stand there and break it down and say, well, I had a House bill to raise the minimum wages. You need to pay attention to the people that you're sending to the legislature. Or, you know, some people are more about positions than it is about policy. And so not in our communities. And I see it all the time, because when I got there, I thought we were all on one page, and it's not necessarily so. So people have to know, you have to meet them where they are, give them the information that affects them. Just like Jonathan Pastor Hill just said, you got to let them know that, you know, we're fighting down here to get the minimum wages. I've got a bill to raise the minimum wage to $15. I mean, if you can't come, somebody has to come, got to represent the voices. And so, but you got to make sure that you're hitting that all the time, because people don't get it. They just don't get it when they say, I don't have enough to get my child some toys. Well, here's why. You know, here you got to work 2 jobs. If the education is bad, here is why. We're not putting our money where our mouths are in this state. And so you just got to keep pounding on that. For me, that's the way I do it.
Yes, ma'am. President McClanahan, I think I saw your hand.
Oh, you did.
I know you. I see you in the streets working. So I know you're reaching the people where they are. I can witness that.
Well, you're so true. You know, we have to, Jonathan and Rep Marcel talked about it. We have to meet the people where they at, wherever they are. If they're in the jungle, we need to go to the jungle. If they're at the bottom of the sea, we need to go to the bottom of the sea. But we need to not only talk differently, we need to show them different pictures. You know, we'll talk about voting and say, we need to show schools closed down. We need to show hospitals closed down. We need to show long food lines. You need to show them pictures of jails overcrowding. They need to know what it really is, and it needs to become personal to them, because everyone is affected by that. But also, we need to have all hands on deck. You can't say vote and not talk about your churches or your fraternities and sororities. You know, a couple of years ago, the NAACP statewide, we did a souls to the polls. That means everybody was wearing souls to the polls. Everybody was going to the polls to vote. Those are the things we must do consistently. We do them 1 to 2 times, it's over with. But one thing that I was kind of perturbed about is that during the past year's election cycle, we did not get anybody excited about going to vote. We had a whole year and no one really talked about voting because they did not have opponents. Whether you have an opponent or not, Black folks and marginalized folks do not have the luxury to sit at home. We don't. That was an opportunity to create chronic voters. We created more apathy. We created more people sitting at home. We created more people not really understanding the process than we did anything. That hampers our ability to move forward. And so we need to, our schools, universities need to talk about voting. We have a voting on homecoming day. Where they do that at? You can't have homecoming on days when we have important elections. That should not happen. These boards, these university boards should say, stop. It's too important. Not let me have the football game or the vote. To me, it's no brainer. But also we need to have these little small mom and pop organizations, they need to get involved. Everyone can play a part. We just need to determine what part they're going to play.
And Moderator Merrick, all politics is local. And because I'm north of 10, I know you all have heard about the one vote that we had in the sheriff race.
Yes,
That
ma'am.
really resonated nationwide, just not only in our state. And I mentioned March 23rd because that election is back on the ballot, and citizens in this area have already voted twice. Now we're up 3 times for this. But it is important, if we do not rally our local ballots, that's where it starts. Anybody who was a city council may move to a state representative. A state representative may move to a congressional district. But we have to tell our individuals who are voting age, we have not registered anybody. That's not our goal for this election. It is to mobilize the hundreds of thousands who are already registered who did not show up at the ballot. So what we have formulated is all these organizations, as the President McElhann has said, we're not in any particular colors. The only color that we're wearing is the ballot. And that is to get the folk out to the ballot. But if we take care of the local, I think when we get to the state and national, we'll see more of a turnout.
Good point. All good points. And I can tell you all are very passionate about this issue. And so all the more reason for us to have this conversation this evening. So again, thank you for being here and thank you for sharing those comments. Chief Morse, we're giving you a rest, sir, because we're gonna, the crime section is gonna be largely yours. So continue to relax until we get to that.
It's
So
fine. I'll say that as a civil service employee, I can't take a stance one way or the other on politics. Law prohibits it, but I can say it's extremely important for everybody to vote. How else you can get your voice heard? You got to get out there and vote when all matters.
all right, thank you, sir. So we're going to take a few questions from the audience. I'll ask Dr. Dennis if there are questions in the chat or in the Q&A.
Yes, the first question, what is the rationale for establishing the lines of demarcation that establishes the new district?
Representative Marcel, if you'll take that one.
Okay, what was the question again? Establishing the lines?
Yeah, it said, what is the rationale for establishing the lines of demarcation that establish the new district?
Well, first of all, you got, it has to be contiguous. It has to go without breaking up communities. There are so many different variables that's in that we had to put on at the hearing. So you can't just have, it can't just be a straight line. It has to be communities of interest. All of those things had to be put on at the hearing to show that you could establish those lines and go up and encounter enough Black voters to create the district. And so that is my interpretation of I think what your question is asking.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Dennis, are there other questions in the Q&A?
Yes, we have several. The next question, just to move it around a little bit, the next question, can you provide a list of resources that provide transportation to the polls other than Council on Aging?
Okay, that's a local question. Representative Marcel, President McClanahan.
Yes, you can contact any faith base in the Shreveport-Bossier area, and I'm sure it's the same in Baton Rouge and throughout the state. Faith base, you also can contact any Panhellenic council that represents the Divine Nine, and they can provide that information. Most representatives, I know when we had Senator Tarver, and I'm sure I can't speak for Senator Jenkins, but Senator Tarver always provided opportunities for individuals to call for transportation. So if you need the transportation, we can provide some numbers in the chat if you're north, south, east, or west that you can contact. There is not any reason why individuals should not be going to the poll. Also in the Shreveport-Bossier area, our sports trend has provided a 2-year grant for anybody can ride the bus free anywhere they need to go. So they certainly can access that opportunity. But we'll put some numbers in the chat, and I'm sure Baton Rouge Sigma also has a list of resources. But if that is the concern, I will give you my number, and that's 318-780-7926. We can get you there. We will prefer recommendations for early voting, March 9th through 16th. And you can do that at your locations from 8:30 a.m. until 6 p.m., with the exception of that Sunday. So we don't encourage you to wait till March 23rd. Let us help you get to the poll between the 9th and 16th. But thank you for your question, and we will provide those numbers.
Thank you, President Bryant. I feel like I felt a vibe that you would drive down from Shreveport and help us get or drive wherever you needed to drive across the state if someone said they needed a ride to the polls. That's what I sensed in your passion there. So thank you for that. Reverend Hill or President McClanahan, any other comments regarding additional resources for transportation?
Most definitely. Most definitely, the NAACP provides transportation no matter where you're at. We cover pretty much every parish in the state of Louisiana. We have an active branch or someone there that could provide. So contact your local NAACP office, but also Power Coalition. They provide a ride to the polls. So, and as well as President Bryant, churches. You know, most churches are willing participants in the political process, and we're more than happy to give rides to the polls. So we want to eliminate that barrier of having a ride. I'm like President Bryant. I'll drive to pick you up. I do it anyway, but I will make sure that you get to the polls to cast your vote. And also, I'm from North Louisiana, and we need to talk about Zwolle High School. We need to talk about the greatest organization this side of heaven, 1906 organization that is. Thank you all.
Okay, I love these these moments of personal privilege that we're taking. Very good. Chief Morris, you got to tell us what high school you went to, sir. Just so for the record, so we all know where everybody went.
Yeah, so I'm from Slidell, Louisiana. Went to North Shore High School. I graduated in 1998 and then moved up here to Baton Rouge to go to LSU, and I've been here ever since, graduating from LSU.
Okay, good enough. So we got everybody covered in the state on high schools. Thank you. I appreciate that moment this little commercial break that we took. So, Dr. Dennis, we're going to pause on the questions from the audience and pick back up with our next topic area. And we want to move into the topic area of our closed primaries. While we're talking about voting, that was an initiative that we saw come forth in this first special session. Representative Marcel, the special session that was designed for redistricting, and the closed primary conversation came up. So the reintroduction of the concept of the closed primaries got a little confusing for all of us. You know, we had open primaries in Louisiana, we had closed, and we went back to open, and now there's a push to go back to closed. And explain what the intent was in returning to this form of primaries and what actually occurred with it during the first special session. Like where did we actually land with it?
Well, Dr. Merritt, I think you started off with the good answer: confusion. We were not only were the constituents confused, a lot of the legislators were confused. My belief is that it came into play when it said, well, if we're going to give you a second congressional district, let's close the primaries. When you close the primaries, that means that you have to vote either Democrat or Republican, right? Either one. The independent people cannot vote in that general election. So they really kind of marginalize independent voters. In the past, we've always, for many, many years, let me say that, it was mostly just two parties, Democrat and Republican. But now a lot of people have shifted themselves into independents. And the independents can vote either way. they can come into a polling place and says, look, I want to vote for Ms. Marcel. They're going to close that and say, if you're not a major party, which is only two major parties in Louisiana, Democrat and Republican, then you cannot vote in that election. And so what they're really going to try to force people to do, this is Denise Marcel's opinion, is to switch back over to being a Republican. Because a lot of people have decided they don't like what either sides are doing in this political arena, and they've decided to be independents. But that usually benefits the Democrats. Independents vote more heavily Democrat, and they don't want that to happen. So any opportunity that they have to change that, they would. So they open it up for more seats than they ended up with. It's now only for the congressional seats and the judicial Supreme Court seats, are the closed primaries. But initially they tried to push it off on everybody, but they got a lot of pushback from some of their own members. And when it got to be so convoluted, they just settled on doing it for the congressional seats, because people said if they the ones who want it, then let's just do it for them. Let's not push this on everybody. And the reason why, I did a little digging into it, Dr. Merrick. The reason why we returned, we did it once, and then we went right back, because at elections, it was confusing. It was confusing for people. People said, this is not good. This is not good for voters. And we want to give voters every opportunity to vote. And it's apparent that some people don't want people to have every opportunity to vote. And this was just another step towards stopping people from voting, especially voting for Democrats.
You know, there's such a thing as voter fatigue, and that closed primary may have created just that, that, you know, people, because of the confusion and the constant going to the ballot, we're like, okay, what am I voting for? I thought I voted for this already, and we're actually voting for it again.
And let me, I don't want to cut you off, but let me clear up something. There's a no party, and then there's independent.
Right.
So and people don't know when they haven't selected a party that they're no party or they're independent. A lot of people don't know the difference. They just don't want to be Democrats or Republican. So that piece in itself gets to be confusing, whether you're no party. So no party people, you can go vote. But if you declared yourself as an independent, guess what? You can't vote. That's not fair to people, in my opinion. So I voted against it, but just my 2 cents.
Now, that was important for us to talk about the closed primary, because it did get confusing. We didn't know exactly where it landed. And so it is in place now for the congressional seat, and what else?
Supreme Court judges.
And Supreme Court judges.
Justices.
Okay. Now let me ask this before we move on to the next question. Is this something that can possibly resurface during this next not the next special session, but during the regular session?
It could, but I think I saw Mr. Mike McClanahan had his hand up. I don't know if you want to add to something I said, but it could, any of these matters could show up again. We were out of time, and a lot of this stuff was very rushed. I do foresee a lot of the things that they attempted to do in the special session to come back again. I foresee that happening.
Okay. President McClanahan?
Yeah, good answer, Rep. You're so right. Louisiana for years was deemed to be a Democratic state. For the most part, even when whenever President Biden won, Louisiana was still a Democratic state. The problem is that we found it during these lawsuits that white Democrats don't vote for Black Democrats. And so you say, why we can't continue to win at this level in the House, the Senate, congressional seats, Supreme Court seats, and what have you, because white folks ain't gonna vote for Black folks. And I use that analogy. They want them to run football for LSU and the Tech and what have you. But the minute that young man grows up and wants to do something other than run the football or the basketball and want to represent them, they will tell them no by either switching their party or not voting at all. And so that's why you've seen over the years the Democratic vote drop off, because people at that time were registered Democrats, but they never would vote for a Black Democratic candidate. But the other piece to this is that Black folks are nowadays, or young people, the data shows young people are registered as Republicans. And so I don't know how that pairs, because rarely do you see a Black Democrat win in a particular race. I know some people that have switched parties that were Black so that they thought they could capture the white Republican vote, but that's just not the case. You could change; they could change their party affiliation to Jesus, Jesus in Spanish, and they still would not get the vote, because white people do not believe. And this is lawsuits, a prime example. This lawsuit that challenges the new congressional seat.
Mm-hmm.
White folks said in that particular lawsuit, I was told that they do not want a Black person representing them. The majority, the data, the numbers say that seat is what, Denise, help me if I'm representing Marcel, 52 or 53% Black.
Right.
Majority. That means the other makeup is what is it, 47% white? And
Correct.
so they're saying now that's a slim majority, because most of the time these districts are made up of 67%. So being able to vote in these primaries, you're gonna eliminate a whole block of people who really ain't gonna vote for the Republican, the Black candidate anyway. So we need to be conscious. I'm glad that bill was shot down, but every chance the devil get an opportunity to raise his ugly head, he will.
Thank you for that, for adding that to the conversation, President McClanahan. So what's going to be our plan of action? And this is for everyone who would like to chime in. What's our plan of action in terms of voter education on this primary structure and letting everyone know what the changes are? I know what we're doing right now is part of it, and that's part of our plan, but what else is out there that we need to do, or that you all will be doing in light of this?
I know we will be working in some very collaborative efforts north of 10 with all the stakeholders, not any particular group, to ensure that we inform every age voter what's happening. There was a lot of confusion around the session that we just recently had, the special session, and the closed primary, because people are still not clear. As Representative has articulated, there are only 2 groups of elected officials that are in this category. But most individuals have walked away from the table that everyone who is on the ballot will be in a closed primary. So the first thing, we must dispel that this information that everyone is in this category. So that's going to be our first work. And then we need to let them understand it is not impacting this upcoming ballot. It will go into place for the 2024 November 5th election. So we have an apathy of individuals not voting. And when they hear all this information coming out, they become more confused and probably will not readily vote because they are not sure. So the first thing we're working north of 10 is to make sure they understand there are only 2 categories of elected officials impacted by the closed primary. And that is the senators and the Supreme Court, which we did not redistrict. A lot of people think that the Supreme Court was redistricted, but
that's correct. It didn't happen.
It's just a lot of information. Moderator Merrick, that we probably need to do a checklist, a very simple checklist, ABC checklist, and let it be the same one that will uniform the state. So whatever is said in the north will be said in the east, west, and also in the south. That way, any voter in Louisiana will have the same material. And every organization doesn't need to develop their own checklist. But let's try to do a combined effort. And I would love to see that go out before March 9th, early voting starts. Because many individuals I've spoken with here feels that it will be impactful on this election, and it has nothing to do with this election.
Mhm. That's important. I love the notion of a unitized checklist that we can all sign off on and agree to and circulate, because it is important to be singing from the same sheet of music that we are. It just sounds better, and it's better for everyone. Representative Marcel?
Yes, I did want to add that the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus, they're doing their retreat in North Louisiana, and they're coming in an effort to help you guys up in North Louisiana. So I think that's gonna possibly be a help for you guys. I know that it's something that I have not seen them do before, so I'm certainly saying kudos to that. That the Black Caucus is coming to North Louisiana to assist in the elections. And I do believe that we do need a checklist, and we need to stay focused on one thing, on getting people to the polls. Well, I don't mean one thing, but first of all, to getting them to the polls. I think it's important. We have a lot of people who are registered just not going to the polls, and I think that's going to have to be our primary focus going forward. And I will chime in just a tidbit on the Supreme Court seats. We could have passed it. They had an agreement. The Supreme Court justices agreed themselves on a solution, and that was still fought. Again, they don't want to concede power.
So,
Great point. Yes, Reverend Hill.
Dr. American, and I appreciate this, and I thank Representative Marcel for her comments, because it gave me clarity on what the final law is, because I was still confused, right? Which is interesting. So I appreciate you helping me understand. It's just congressional and Supreme Court. But I guess a greater question would be is, are we operating under the assumption that there's a lot of confusion? Because as we talk about the everyday voter, I wonder even if they even know that this has been a conversation, right? We may be operating from a position where we are trying to understand and we are trying to navigate it. But the person who is, as you mentioned earlier, Representative Marcel, just going about their daily job, do they even know this discussion is happening? Will it even bother them one way or the other? And we may be operating from assumption that they are, and they really not. And I'm just curious to know, does anybody know that groundswell that they are confused and they just may not be?
I think it just simply may be, Reverend Hill, that those who follow it, as many of us on the webinar do, we were confused because it was so much back and forth. Those who were marginalized were probably already, this was not on their radar anyway. But I think and not to take the answer from you all, but I think going back to that checklist of what we need to do going forward, maybe not dwell on, well, this happened, that happened, and this is where we are, but just really speak to, this is where we are, and this is what we need you to do. These are the things we need you to be aware of, not so much the sausage making and how we got here, but this is where we are, and this is what we need to do.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yes,
you know, I know when we campaigning for our own personal elections, I see us we get very creative. We're going to make sure we phone bank, and we're going to call everybody and ask them, to vote for us. And we're going to ask them, if we're the candidate of their choice. I think we need to have that same vigor, right? And calling and asking people, are you a registered Democrat? Or, if they're registered as an independent, you need to let them know that the law has changed, that they can only vote in this. But I'm not going to say none of us. Most of us don't want to spend the campaign funds that we have to do that. And that is a part of the problem. I'm going to talk about the elected officials. We will do it when it's us, but we won't do it when it's somebody else. I mean, I just came out of a race helping somebody, and they said, well, you look like you was on the ballot. I didn't think you had an opponent. Democracy was on the ballot. That's and right. Yes, I was working. But what I'm saying that we've got to do a better job of, at least communicating with our colleagues, my colleagues in the Black Caucus, and everybody, that we got to act the same way as if we were running for something, that we want people to go to the polls. Because if it ain't us, We really don't put a lot of energy into it. And I see it happen. And I'm gonna say this final thing, a lot of people want to be paid for everything. And that's a setback for us. I came up with Mike No, and when we were just doing it because it was the right thing to do.
Mhm.
I know people got to be paid, but at the same time, we've got to wonder, when are we going to come together as a people and do what's right for the people overall, where we all rise. Because if we don't all rise, we're still in trouble.
Great point. Man, that is a drop the mic statement, for sure. So Dr. Dennis, we're going to come to you for questions in the chat.
Yes.
The Q&A chat, that is.
One question, many times people say my vote does not count, therefore I'm not going to vote. The Shreveport Sheriff's race is a prime example that every vote counts. Are there any plans to catapult these efforts to prevent voters from staying home?
Yeah, that's President Bryant. It's that race is like the poster child for yes, my vote counts.
And we spoke with that earlier. This race that we had with the Caddo Parish Sheriff is back on the ballot for March 23rd. And the determination was one vote did count. And at that time, Whitehorn won the election against John Nicholson. It went to the judicial system where they shared information that because of some concerns with ballots, that it would go back to a full election. So every vote counts. And that is what I think the panelists have stated. Even the newly appointed chief has said it is most critical that if you are a registered voter, you exercise your right. And when you exercise your right, it makes it very clear that your vote counts. If you don't vote, then whoever turns up at the ballot, they will elect the candidate of choice. If you vote, then you will have some input into making that decision. So in North Louisiana, the only thing we're doing is mobilizing the vote. We're not registering anyone. We know at this point we have enough individuals registered on the rolls to change our trajectory. Now, what we need individuals to do is make sure if you're doing the mail-in ballot, and that's the conversation that we have to have, and I know the NAACP has some strategies, that you follow the instructions carefully. There were so many ballots that were not counted because of errors that were made that impacted the outcome of the election greatly. So when we get the mail-in ballot, and I can tell you, I already have mine. It's come out very early this time for whatever reasons. But these will be the tests again going forth in the elections if this information is correctly done by the voters and submitted. So I empower anyone that has a ballot, that has questions, reach out to your local NAACP or your voter register office and ask. Do not return that ballot if you're not sure that it has been corrected with all information on there carefully. And please use a pen. You have an option for a pencil, but I'm an educator and anything can be erased. So please use a pen when you submit that ballot. But look at the instruction carefully. And to the individual who asked the question, and for the 219 who are participating this evening, take it from the newly informed chief. Every vote counts, and your vote matters.
All right. If I may.
Yes, yes, sir.
The Shreveport race, as everyone alluded to, was a prime example of every vote counts. I got calls, right after the vote about participating in the judicial process, and my response was the democratic process would win. As Representative Marcel say, if they would have voted as President Brown, they voted, we didn't even have to take it to the judicial system. I think we can't, as Black leaders, can't confuse the people anyway either, because in Shreveport you had the Black power establishment saying one thing, the other power staff saying another thing. No, we have to be on one accord. We can't run behind the dollar and say, well, you got my vote, but man, I would have voted for you, but I really like this guy. Don't even know the guy, but took his money, right? We have to stop that. We have to encourage people. We have to have some integrity at some point in time. You know, I know voting. The next frontier is not only the major cities, but rural America. We talked about how do we get the message about closed primaries, open primaries, about election. How do we get that to the rural Louisiana where they can vote? The information need to travel. We can get on social media and talk about everything. We can watch this and watch that. Watch and talk about voting. I say all the time, if we're in Walmart, we need to be talking about voting. If we're at church, we should end the prayer. Thank you, Jesus. Let's vote. We need to do that. The voting need to be second nature. You know, when the candidate Whitehorn lost, and you know, to get people to go to the polls a third time, we can't get them to go the first time. And so we must capitalize on these opportunities. We can't let these opportunities fail us. So we must, as a people, as a Black caucus, as a racial people, as ministers of the gospel, as NAACP people, we must be talking the same language, painting the same picture. If not, people are going to stay at home. They're going to say, they ain't even together. Why should I go vote? And when a person like Whitehorn, who was more than qualified for the position, loses, what we going to say? The finger should be pointed at all of us because we fail the people to get them excited, get them galvanized around a candidate that looks like us, who's well qualified for the position. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I've just got to say, President, these presidents are doing it. President Bryant, you're old school with that. Use a pen, don't use a pencil. Thank you for that little nugget, just in case. Use a pen in this digital age. All right, folks, we're going to move our conversation over to crime. We want to try to conclude by 8 o'clock, but we're going to be very mindful of our time with you all this evening. So Chief Morris, welcome again. Welcome to Baton Rouge. Welcome to BRPD. You've got some big shoes to fill for the chiefs who come before you. And we would like you to just introduce yourself briefly to us. Tell us a little bit about you and your plans for BRPD.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, like I said earlier, I've been in Baton Rouge since 1998, graduate from LSU, and actually been a part of Baton Rouge Police Department for almost 21 years now. I'd had a couple of years law enforcement prior to that with the sheriff's office. So local law enforcement is very dear to my heart. Shared earlier last week, the week before that, my 100-day plan, gather, gain, and give. And so that's what I'm doing right now, is just trying to gather as much information I can, go into all the spaces, all the places, meeting every single one of my employees internally, all the sworn officers, all the civilian officers, dispatchers, but then also as many places and meetings I can go to in the community, going to meet those people. With the mayor, who I got to give shout outs to her because I know she's one of y'all sorority members as well. She's got a lot of good systems in place with the safe, healthy, hopeful Baton Rouge that I've tapped into, a lot of resources like that I'm trying to get that information so I can see, because I know making policy changes and just making decisions from the seat that I'm in now, it's going to affect everyone. It's going to affect everyone internally, Baton Rouge Police Department, but it also affects the community at large. And so I want to have as much information and get as many of those community stakeholders involved when I make those decisions.
Thank you. So the spotlight is on crime right now. I want to follow up with a question about many of our participants on this webinar are residents of the greater Baton Rouge community, and there's a growing concern that crime rates are increasing. We heard about it all throughout the last election cycle, and we just sort of keep hearing anytime we chime in the news, it's there, it's before us. It always leads off the news, it seems. What can you share about the plan to lower crime rates here in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, so I'm also a resident of Baton Rouge. I live, I think, just a couple hundred yards right outside the city limits. The way that it falls out, but my parents, my in-laws, they all live inside the city limits. If they call 911, it's the Baton Rouge Police Department that's responding to their homes. So I have vested interest in the safety of our community. I have vested interest in the professionalism and the training of our police officers, because I know they're the ones that are going to be out there every day having those contacts. I think there's a difference between perception and statistics. The statistics show that our violent crime rate is going down, especially over the last couple of years. We've seen a decrease in all violent crime, including homicides and shootings. But sometimes, perception is reality. And not only do I want the statistics to be down, but I want people to feel safe. I want the perception to also be that Baton Rouge is a safe city, that Baton Rouge Police Department is there to protect its citizens and to serve alongside of them.
Thank you, Chief. It's so important that we hear that. And I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to rally behind and support you in all of these efforts that are going on. Let's talk a bit about the youth offenders, because we're seeing a lot more of that now. There seems to be a growing number of juvenile offenders, such that there's a desire to create more and more secure youth penal facilities. So more facilities, and then ones that are more secure, because the youth are, as you've seen, escaping some of them. So share your thoughts on this in this growing area of law enforcement where we're dealing with younger people or younger offenders.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have seen that trend that the age, especially on our violent offenders, is getting lower and lower and lower. It's very, very concerning. That's why I'm very interested in to see what's going to happen in the special session that's coming up. I'm even more invested into some of our community-oriented programs like Police Athletic League, the mayor's initiative to with Employee Baton Rouge partnership, where we have young people come and work for us and do internships over the summer. We need to be out there with the juveniles and the young people. It's not just a police problem. It's not something that only the police can solve. We really, really, really have to lean on the community resources and have them alongside of us helping in these issues.
Absolutely. So you talked about the special session that's coming up that's dedicated to crime. And Representative Marcel, I want to transition to you. So we've been hearing in the news the last several months the focus on crime. It's really been out there and in front of us. So much so that the governor is planning to call this second special session that's going to get started right after Mardi Gras, I think. And so we also just heard that there'll be a New Orleans troop for state police, or at least that's being proposed. A special troop for just New Orleans, it sounds like. So what can we expect in this special session coming up? What types of pieces of legislation will be coming forth?
Well, I think he was pretty clear about what he intends to do. And one of those things is creating a special state police troop for New Orleans itself, because the crime in New Orleans, it's being said it's the same as in Baton Rouge, that it's on a rise. I would have to agree with the chief that it's not, it's actually going down if you actually look at the trending numbers. But if people keep saying the same thing and not putting the money in other programs to help the problem, then that becomes reality. The question becomes, are we trying to incarcerate more people? Because we were very good at that in Louisiana. We have incarcerated people for longer terms than any other state in the nation. What we are not good at is rehabilitating people. So the question becomes, when are we going to put the money behind mental health, which many of these situations are? And no, not everyone has a mental health issue, but many of them do. When are we going to put the money behind raising up the wages so that the parents can be there to kind of help their kids with the homework and they don't fall behind and fall out of school? These are contributing factors to crime. And everybody wants to talk about the penalization of it, but nobody wants to talk about how do we eliminate it. And we eliminate it by doing the very things I just talked about, by putting money into the education, into the programs for these kids, and not just locking people up and throwing away the key. We were very good at it, and it didn't make us any safer. And it's not going to make us any safer if we go back to that. I believe and hope, I'm hopeful that we won't go back and try to undo everything that we did in the 8 years that I served on the Criminal Justice Committee at the House. I saw that coming the last session. A lot of the bills were rewinding what the work that we had done to save for reentry and those types of things. That's what helped people to start new lives and not have the recidivism rate that we have. If making us safer, and I'm gonna say this because I will get real emotional about this crime topic. If locking people up makes us safer, Louisiana ought to be the safest place on the planet because we have done that. It did not make us any safer. So yes, I want to see what they can do to curb crime. Yes, I want to do something with the programs to help kids. Yes, I want to put the money behind the mental health. But more importantly, I'm gonna say this about our juvenile jail, because that is really not a juvenile facility. And when we have a juvenile facility, it is supposed to be where we hold kids for a number of hours, not eternity. And we have really turned that into a prison. And we're trying to figure out why kids are smart enough to break out of a prison at 60-some years old. No, it's not the facilitator. It is not the lady who's leading the juvenile. The facility is outdated and it's not structured for what it's being used for. It's used for a prison, and that's not what it's supposed to be held for, used for, and holding juveniles for. That was never the intent, the things that are happening there now. So I hate it when they come forth and they try to blame, the administrator of these facilities. They're working with what they have, and that facility is not up to date to hold you. And I don't care where you can put, if you start putting them in my house, they're gonna break out because it's not built. My house wasn't built to hold them. And that's not, and it's just what it is. We just have to be very vocal about our youth, supportive of our youth. There are some that need to be put away. I agree with that, but that's not everybody. And we can't put everybody in one box.
President McClanahan, I think I see your hand.
I love the answer that the chief and Representative Marcel gave. Crime is all our problem. We just can't think it's the police department's problem or the parent of the offender. It's all our responsibility. Our schools, we all play a part. These small sports organizations, they play a part. We all should play a part. And we cannot lock our way up into a safer community. It didn't happen then, it will not happen now. But what we can do is come together and start talking about children. We can identify those. Well, let me say this, the system has already identified young men and women who will become offenders. By the second grade, if they're not learning, they're getting expelled from school. They are building jails and prisons based upon that. We have to turn that around. We want more schools built, less jails, less prisons built, because it affects all of our community, all of us in the Black community. Crime just doesn't affect the one who was offended, or the offender affects all of us. I say this before, as a Black male, I love to see, I was at an event this weekend where Black males were being awarded for finishing high school, for finishing college. Those are the things we have to go and get them jobs and what have you. We must create that type of environment for our kids to live in. We must do it at an early age. We can't start teaching at the second, third, or fourth grade. We must now start teaching behavior, correct behavior in the womb. So when they come out, they understand that. But as someone alluded to on another part of the segment, is that now you have mothers working 2 or 3 jobs, and the kids are raising themselves. We have to help the parent. We have to provide incentives for them to take off, to go to the schools, because education is going to be the key anyway. So I applaud the chief and any chiefs of police, wherever they may be. The NAACP is not anti-police. Do something to me, I'm calling the police.
That's
I
right.
also want to chime in on that, moderator, Mary.
Yes, ma'am. President
We have a
Bryant.
newly appointed individual that's going to be over the juvenile system. Kenny Lofton, who was over the Red River, and we had some concerns with that particular facility here. Some people refer to it as the where. I think this is a good time not to start another task force, but to ask him to meet with some key stakeholders, Representative Marcel and others, what his plan is before he gets too far into the job to ensure that we get back to that early childhood concept of every child going into a universal pre-K. I hope that is still on the radar for our legislative session. If we educate them early on, we can prevent some of this misbehavior later. Family is the key. We will never get away that a strong home with parents that teach good moral character is going to always be essential with a Bible-fed, led home. Everybody's not going to embrace that. So from a social standpoint, justice in Louisiana, I think it's a good time for us to get with him. He's just recently appointed to see what he plans to do and if he is going to try and overturn everything that has been done on the juvenile justice side over the last 8 years, so that we can get something in place before the summer. Again, children have all that time in the summer and really nothing constructive to help them make good choices.
We're coming upon our time, and I want to ask one last question, and thank you for that, President Bryant. I want to ask one last question of all of our panelists to go around and answer, and then we're going to turn it back over to our social action chair. But let's see, that question is, what are some ways that each of you in your respective roles with your respective organizations can assist in lowering these crime rates or just addressing crime in general? I know President Bryant, you sort of alluded to that a bit, but speak to it from the standpoint of your organization specifically. And we'll start with you, Reverend Hill.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just being present, right? Being present for the individuals in our community at every level, making it a priority to be present. After 9/11, there was this whole slogan about if you see something, say something. And so I think we have to take that to another level, not just if we see something as it relates to crime, but if you see somebody who needs help, how do you point them to the resources that can serve as an early intervention for them? The chief talked about the mayor's Safe, Hopeful, Healthy initiative, right? A wealth of resources that are available for individuals who may be in need, and it can serve as an early intervention to help deter crime. But I also think changing the narrative. I heard it consistently on this, that crime rates are going down, right? Statistically. Representative Marcel talked about how we need to look at recidivism, right? President McCallahan talked about the program he went to celebrating young men who were doing great things. And I always wonder if we started the news cycle or the news show every day, the first 7 minutes amplifying something positive for those communities, would that really change the narrative and the perspective we have in our communities? I often say the only time we see Black men being celebrated on the first 5 minutes of the news is if they're playing football for LSU. But if we change that narrative on all of our news cycles, would that give a different perspective of how people see themselves in their communities that I believe could potentially lead to reducing crime? So yeah, being present.
Thank you, Reverend Hill. Representative Marcel.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to agree with many of the things that Reverend Hill has said. Certainly staying there, fighting at the legislature on behalf of our youth, on behalf of our officers, because I tell people all the time, I fight for our policemen, and as well as I fight for our citizens. I think there's a compromise that can be held in between all of those things, and at the same time put money, because he needs additional officers. We need additional resources for additional things for our children to bring them up out of the situations and a lot of the issues that they're facing. I know for me, they're talking about doing some more drug courts. I'd like to see us move along some of those lines with many of our youth. A lot of the youth that we're dealing with are being caught with drugs or are on drugs. And so we've got to face the fact that we have some issues with drugs with our youth. Let's see, can we do something along those lines? I certainly supported drug court. I actually filed legislation for domestic violence. And what people say, well, what does that have to do with crime? It has everything to do with crime. If you don't get the parents in there and figure out where the problem is caused, and if you don't get not just the victim the help, but the perpetrator some help, then you go back into the same cycle. So yes, I filed legislation to create our newly domestic violence court in the 19th JDC. And so I'll continue to do those types of things to help with the crime, because I think ultimately all of those things help. Giving police a pay raise, helping with our youth, doing the mental health. And I keep bamming that as hard as I can. That mental health issue is really a problem, and we've got to figure out. I passed the bill to allow students to have a day off with their parents so that they would not, if they're having a mental health breakdown, without having to go to a doctor. Many of them can't get to a doctor. So we don't want kids coming to our schools shooting it up, and then we all figuring out, oh, look, wow, they got a problem, just because we didn't want to give them an excused day off. And so I passed those types of legislation in the last few years, and that's what I'll continue to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that all of us are on the same team, because I don't think I would want to take on any one of you on the opposite side. So I'm glad we're all in this together. So President Bryant, your thoughts on the question?
I think what every individual has shared is great information. I'm a person that like uniformity, and I know what is good for Baton Rouge is good for Shreveport, because we in the Caddo Bossier area, we experience some of the same hardships. We have children in schools. Public schools was the key that allowed me to advance the levels and to get educated. I think we have to always embrace the parents, particularly mothers. So when that child is born, that's when we have to start building. And that's why I push so hard that we have to have those interventions, put information in their hands. What we give them in Baton Rouge, give them the same things in Shreveport. Uniformity. There are so many mental health facilities, but individuals don't know how to access them. There is so much bureaucracy that you have to fill out in red tape that prevents you from accessing resources and services. I just think if we could all get on the same page, what is good for Louisiana is good for all Louisianians. If it's going to move the needle and help us provide a level playing field for our children and youth, it has to be good. So again, I would be pushing what we can give that parent at birth to say, this is what we need to do in order to ensure your child has an opportunity that maybe they wouldn't have if you wouldn't have the information. Also to provide some release in schools. Teachers can't do it all. You know, we inherit any social ill that comes across, it ends up in a classroom. But to get more resources in there, and Caddo Parish did do something with the money that was allocated for mental health. They started a one-stop center, which parents can go and get every service they need, medical, if it's something in judicial, if it's something with the police agencies or whatever, they could get it. But it's not enough. And so I would love to see our state, as we approach, this half of this year, to do something great, but to let it be uniformity. I think we have too many pieces of the puzzle that never fit together for individuals, particularly those who are marginalized, undereducated, and cannot access the resources. Individuals who can access resources and really know how to travel and navigate the system, the children are always going to be on the side of winning.
Thank you, President Bryant. Chief TJ Morris.
Yeah, so for me, we need to continue our enforcement efforts, those that have led us to this decrease in violent crime, of course, but we also need to just continue to engage the community. Programs that we have, like the Chiefs Advisory Council, which I look forward to continuing and get input from them. Our Citizens Academy, our youth programs, the Safe, Hopeful, Healthy. We need all of those things involved. One of the quotes I share is just that the police are the public and the public are the police. And we all need to work together towards the same common goal, keeping the youth engaged. I would love to see the data. I was listening to today some stats in one of my meetings about our truancy rate climbing in Baton Rouge. And I'm sure that has something to do with the 20-something beds that we have at the juvenile detention center that are full with people that are accused of homicide right now. And that's juveniles that are accused of homicide. So I'm very interested in continuing all those efforts. And then on the other side is the full transparency aspect, where our officers, we need to bridge that gap between the distrust in the community and our police officers. I think that will help a lot to solving some of these crimes and getting us to work together. And I believe in transparency in the full aspect of it. When our officers are wrong, we're going to hold them accountable, and we're going to look at ways to streamline that process. I know there's laws and there's certain things. Hey, we can't release this right now. I want to streamline that. I want to make that go faster. But I also believe in transparency, and when our officers are doing right, we're going to show that. We need to do a better job of showing our officers out there coaching football games, out there applying tourniquets and chest seals and Narcan and saving lives. We need to be transparent in both ways so that we build that trust back with the community, showing our officers when they're wrong, but when they're right, and really increasing those efforts as well. We want to share the data and do it and support all those organizations that are doing the work and continue to work with them, so that we can just all go towards that same goal that we all have, and that's for a safer, more prosperous Baton Rouge.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chief. We appreciate that. And again, we can't say thank you enough for spending this time with us this evening, especially as a new chief and getting to know the community. So we jotted down your 3 G's. You were going to gather, gain, and give.
Yes, ma'am. That can be found on our website and our Facebook page, my 100-day plan that I laid out there. But yeah, gather, gain, and give.
Got it. I jotted that down, so we will follow up on that.
Thank you.
President McClanahan, what NAACP actions will be taken in light of where we are with crime? You're muted, sir. There you
I can tell you now that crime is all of our problem. And if it doesn't affect you directly, it would affect you. It should affect you indirectly. And so we must get off of our couches, must get off in front of television and be active in our community. You know, go to the school board meetings, talk about stuff that affect us. You know, we must have a holistic approach. That means if you're a supervisor and you know a mother needs a little time off to attend to her son or daughter, give them a little time off. There's always a little something we can do. If you're a member of a church, the church door should not be closed, except for open on Sundays between 9 and 12. Should be open more than that, because our problems are 24/7, 365. If you have an organization that's feeding, and you know of a parent or a family that needs help, you don't have to put on a horn and sound music to go give them something. Ease a basket of food to them, because I can promise you, the family that's in need to have morals and values too. Everybody at some point in time in that particular environment will fall beneath where they need to be. Need a hand up. Let's give them a hand up. We must instill good morals, good values in our kids. At some point in time, we lost that. And so you see younger offenders, because they don't know what a life means. A life means nothing to them. We must go back to as someone would say, the old landmark. We must go back to where everything matters. When I was brought up, don't rob, steal, kill, those things, as my mother and grandma would say, against God's holy order. We must bring that back into our families. Somewhere we lost it, and that's where we're at today. And so I think we all must play our part and must play it. We must play it willingly, not grudgingly, because our future depends on saving our kids and saving our future generations.
All right, folks, this has been our panel this evening. We're going to do a virtual round of applause. You may not be able to hear it, but we'll ask all of those who are listening to virtually clap. And thank you for spending this time with us this evening. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, your very candid thoughts. We do have a lot of work to do going forward. We know what's next. We know what we need to start to prepare for, and we are ready to do that work. And so I'm going to sign off and turn it over to Ms. Judy Bethley, who serves as a co-chair for Social Action in Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter. Ms. Bethley.
Good evening. On behalf of our president, Dr. Ernie Singleton, who can't not be with us, she's at another meeting, of course, taking care of some Delta business. We want to thank you. Thank you to our panelists for being with us, from taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us. You know, the Bible tells us that our people perish due to lack of knowledge. Well, we want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And we're going to do our part. Social Action Committee of Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni Chapter, led by Dr. Sheila Lewis. We're going to do our part. We're going to take the strategies and ideas and thoughts that you have given us tonight, and we're going to put those to work. And we really want to collaborate with all the other organizations in the community to make a concerted effort to mobilize and energize and get people out to vote, because we know how important it is. We want to thank everyone who participated on this webinar tonight. It has been so very informative. And we want to give a special shout out to our very own Dr. Robin Merritt, who is such a gifted communicator. She is my role model, and we want to thank her for always saying yes. And I always tell her, please don't block me, Robin. Just keep taking my calls, please. So thank you all for sharing with us this evening.
Next up, we're going to hear from, thank you for that shout out, Judy. And I think my phone may have blocked you one time because the text didn't come through. I'm sorry. Next up, Dr. Sheila Lewis.
Good evening, all. This has been a great time for all of us to come together to deal with how do we tackle the issues. But this forum was not just one that happened with the work of one person. I've got to give a shout out to our leadership team. They are forever in a day supporting social action. Dr. Singleton, Robin Bettis, and Dawn Harris. They are our president, first vice president, second vice president. Now, the vision for this forum, it wasn't mine. It was the work of our Soror Brianna Golden, who did the opening remarks. I want to thank our Dr. Leah Raby for the meditation. Our chair, she is truly a doctor of technology in her own way, and that is Chandra Allen Elsie. Our co-chairs, Judy Bethley and Dr. Michelle Dennis, they're always in the background with me, or sometimes out front, making it happen. And I do appreciate Judy and Michelle for their hard work. This work could not have been done without our outstanding, and I'm going to call each one of you expert panelists. You know your subject matter. So we're going to do this again, and we'll have you on for part 2. I want to thank President Michael McClanahan, who serves as the president of the NACP. He and his wife together helped us pull this forum together. It is that we are lifetime partners. Representative C. Denise Marcel, District 61, thank you for your participation. Ms. Giselle Bryan, all the way from North Louisiana, representing Caddo Parish as president of the League of Women Voters. My student, Reverend Jonathan Hill, senior pastor of Evergreen Baptist Church. Who would have thought that the Lord would have landed you where you are in your life? Continue the good work, and he will continue to take care of you. And Chief of Police, Thomas Morris Jr., you're off to a great start. I don't know what the next 20 days are going to look like for you, but you do have a plan to help Baton Rouge and surrounding areas overcome this crisis with our youth and with crime. And so, on behalf of my chapter, I want to thank all of our members who signed on with us tonight, our social media audience, and Mr. McClanahan, you got to know this. Behind every successful man, there's a good old Christian woman. You see your wife, Mrs. Patricia McClanahan? She makes it happen in your absence. And she's the president of the Women's League of the NAACP. She and I have been on the phone for the last week, and I want to thank her as well. She couldn't be with a better husband than what the Lord has blessed us with. So, having said all of the thank yous, Robin, I guess we're going to bid everyone a good night.
Yes, we are, Dr. Lewis, but before we do that, we want to make sure you fill out that evaluation that's been in the chat. So please, we want to get your feedback on that. Dr. Dennis, did you have any other comments regarding the evaluation form that is in the chat?
No, I just again want to encourage everyone to complete our evaluation, and thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Please have a great evening and a happy Mardi Gras. Bye,
Good night,
everyone.